A few months ago, a student called Mark came to me for his first jazz piano lesson. Now, Mark wasn't a complete beginner. He'd actually taken some classical piano lessons so he could read music, and his technique was pretty good. He had also watched quite a number of YouTube videos, and he had worked through a jazz piano book. And Mark was telling me about learning things like spread voicings, position A voicings, position B voicings. So I then asked him, well, Mark, what would you like to work on today? And Mark said, you know what? I've been learning this song called Body and Soul. And honestly, what happened next revealed to me a problem which I think affects most jazz pianists. So not just beginners, but actually most jazz pianists. Because many of us are spending years learning advanced concepts and techniques while we avoid the fundamentals that actually make jazz really work. So that's exactly what this video is going to be about. But before we continue, if you are serious about learning jazz piano, please make sure that you download my free ebook, 10 Steps to Playing Jazz, and simply type the word ebook, and I will send you a link where you can download this book. It's completely free, and it's going to help you to understand the foundations of jazz. Now, if you're ready for a structured step-by-step system, then check out my Jazz Piano Fundamentals course, and that's the course that I designed specifically to help pianists build the foundation that a lot of people skip. Both links are in the description, but now let's get back to Mark. So, I asked Mark to play Body and Soul for me. It kind of went something like this. Something like that. I won't play anymore, I promise. Right, so as he played, I noticed quite a few things immediately, and I'm sure you have too. So number one, Mark was not playing in time. He wasn't entirely sure of the chords either. And whenever Mark made a mistake, he would actually stop, and then he would ask to go back to the beat. So he would play. Oh, let me do that again. So that was basically the nature of that lesson, you know. And what's interesting is that when he restarted, he actually played exactly the same voicings and exactly the same rhythms as he played before. Now, that is actually a very important point, because what it told me is Mark wasn't really playing jazz. He was simply replaying a memorized sequence of notes. So I decided to test Mark a little bit, not to embarrass him and definitely not to catch him out, but simply to find out whether he actually understood this tune that he was playing. So I asked him, well, Mark, what key are you playing this in? First thing, he looked at me and said, I don't know, all I know is I'm playing. So I'm starting there, I'm starting on E flat. So I knew that, okay, Mark doesn't really know what key he's in. So I told him, okay, I can see you're playing it in the key of D flat. So I said, you know what, just in case we come across this in the song, maybe since we're in the key of D flat, can you play for me a turnaround in the key of D flat? Okay. Unfortunately, he couldn't. Okay. And then I said, okay, let me make this a little bit easier. Can you play for me a 2-5-1 in the key of B flat? And again, believe it or not, he couldn't. He could not play a 2-5-1 in the key of D flat. I mean, what gave me a bit of is I said, can you play a 2-5-1 in the key of C? He said, yes. Are you talking about that? I said, exactly, right. But in the key of D flat, he could not play a 2-5-1. Okay. And then I said, okay, Mark, can you play for me the chords in the key of D flat? And he asked me a sincere question. Actually, he just said, well, what do you mean? So again, I knew, okay, he doesn't know about chords in the key. And then I said, okay, Mark, don't worry. Let's go one step further. I just want you to play for me a D flat major scale. And then he said, oh, yeah. I know this one. So it went something like this. Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry. You see? And then he finally said, I got it. Yeah. So I know the D flat major scale. What actually fascinated me wasn't that necessarily Mark could not do these things. I mean, we've all had things that we couldn't do. The real thing that really got my attention is that he didn't seem to understand that he actually needed to know these things in order to play a song in that key with complete freedom, and also with just creativity and variety. So he seemed to be convinced that he already knew that key, and that's why he said, yeah, I'm going to do Body and Soul in the key of D flat, And that's something that I see over and over again with my jazz piano students. So most of them will say things like, inversions. Okay, I know my inversions. They'll probably even play them and say, oh, are you talking about like A minor 7 like this and like that? Yeah, so they'll say, I know my inversions, but what I really need now are jazz voicings. Okay, so I've already done the basics. But the question is, have they really? Because the more I teach, the more I realized that most jazz pianists are trying to skip these very important steps. So they want the cool stuff. So they want the Bill Evans voicings, rootless voicings, those Herbie Hancock sounds that sound like impressionist kind of voicings. They want all these advanced reharmonizations. I had a guy not too long ago playing All the Things You Are with some extremely interesting reharmonizations, but he couldn't play the basic version of it. So they want the difficult jazz standards. They want to be like, ooh. Yeah, so they're trying to play giant steps like that, or Stella by Starlight. They're like, and it's really quite painful to listen to, if we're being completely honest. So they really don't fully understand where those things that they're playing actually come from. And the truth is that advanced voicings are usually just simple ideas used creatively. Take, for instance, an A flat minor 6 chord. Right, so here's A flat. That's A flat minor. So if I'm playing A flat minor 6, it looks like that, right? So you'd really benefit from knowing this simple chord in root position, but also be able to invert this. And I know some people are already saying, but I know my inversions. Actually, if we put it to the test, you might realize that, yeah, you might kind of know it, but how well you know it, that's sometimes debatable, right? And this voicing is not particularly complicated, so I get why people might say, I know the chord. But did you know that if you can invert this and then simply put the note G in your bass, then suddenly that very simple chord, that was just a minor 6, suddenly it becomes a very beautiful dominant chord. In fact, if I play a shell of my G and then play my A flat minor 6, I suddenly get some very interesting sounds. If I just played a 2-5-1, Now it's like, ooh, I want to learn that. I want to learn that. But actually, what is it? It's a simple chord that I'm just inverting. And I know the theorists among us will already tell you that, hang on. That chord is a G7, flat 9. There's the flat 9, sharp 5. There's a sharp 5, you know. Some people will say, it's an altered chord, you know. And that might actually be theoretically correct. But, you know, honestly, life doesn't really have to be that complicated. I prefer to simply think about what I already know. So I already know a simple thing like an A flat minor 6. And if I can play A flat minor 6 comfortably, then I can create all these dominant sounds from it. See, I'm not locked to just one voicing. Okay, so once you start inverting that A minor 6, you suddenly come up with multiple versions of that same dominant sound. So immediately, even my comping, you know, has a bit more variety. If I'm playing a 2-5-1, or maybe let me say a 10 around. So that's already quite interesting, you know, and not necessarily because I've learned something new. I've simply became more fluent with something simple. That's just an A flat minor 6, right? And that is why fundamentals matter. So people are trying to do all these things, but actually, if you go to the basics, you'll come across some interesting things. I noticed there when I played my one chord, I played something like this. If I look at my right hand, this is simply an E minor 7 chord. And in my left, yeah, I'm playing a C. But what does thinking like this, I mean, you'll be like, how does that help me? Well, if I can invert an E minor, you know, in my last few videos, I was showing some stuff that Errol Garner was playing at some point. And if I'm thinking of a song like, all I'm doing is using inversions, but now they sound like, ooh, these beautiful advanced voicings, but they're actually inversions of very simple chords. So to cut the long story short, the fancy stuff comes out of the basic stuff. So master the basics. And this brings me back to Mark, okay, because Mark, my student, right, who I've been talking about from the beginning. So Mark wasn't necessarily an unusual guy. In fact, he's very normal. I think I come across Mark so many times, you know, it's just got a different name. And most students that come to me, most of the new ones that come to me, are making exactly the same mistake. So they're not being completely honest with themselves about where they really are. And if you want to make progress in jazz, I always tell people, you know, it's quite simple. There are only 3 things that you really need to know. So the first thing that you've got to know is you've got to know where you are. And then number 2, you've got to know where you want to go. And then number 3, you now need to start taking steps in that direction. Now, the problem is a lot of musicians don't actually know where they are. Or maybe what's even worse is they don't want to admit exactly where they are. So either they lie to themselves because, I mean, it's good for their ego. Yeah, I know it, but do they really? You know? So, and I understand that because nobody really wants to spend time maybe just practicing scales when they could be learning their giant steps or Stella by Starlight or actually improvising. And nobody really wants to work on inversions, you know, like, you know, they want to be focusing on sophisticated voicings, you know. Nobody just wants to practice a simple 2-5-1 progression when they could actually be learning something like body and soul with spread voicings and so forth, like Mark, right? But the reality is Mark was simply attempting to play body and soul in D flat, yet he wasn't comfortable with the key of D flat itself, right? And that's quite a massive red flag there. knowing something means being completely sure of it. So you should be able to do things like playing the scale while having a conversation with someone. You should be able to play the chords even while talking. In fact, I wasn't even looking at the keys. So we should be able to do some of these things. If someone says to you, play a turnaround in the key of D flat, you can probably talk and not look at the camera at the same time, and maybe you can even play the same thing using some inversions, So you should be able to call upon these little things whenever the music demands it. So you should be able to change a chord. Actually, sometimes that's an interesting thing, or a question to ask yourself, like, in that song that you're playing, are you able to change even just one chord out of all those chords, or play it differently? So the real question, especially talking about something as simple as inversions, is not really, well, have you learned inversions? The real question really should be, can you use inversions freely? Let's say, for instance, while comping. Or can you actually create melodic lines using inversions? Because I could be playing, so this right here, I'm inverting my E flat chord. So I could play something like, or, so I'm actually using my inversions to create some lines, right? Can you move between your inversions without necessarily thinking, okay, can you use them even in a new tune that you've never played before? You could be playing, I'm in the mood for love. Okay, so that's really the difference between, I guess, knowing something from here and being fluent in it. And that's exactly why I've created what I call the jazz piano pyramid. The pyramid basically explains the fastest and most effective path to you becoming a jazz pianist. And at the bottom of the pyramid are the fundamentals. So this includes things like playing in time, being able to play just a few tunes in multiple keys. By the way, the things that I'm describing are found in my Jazz Piano Fundamentals course, right? So playing in time, being able to play some songs in multiple keys, so not just, Autumn Leaves is in the key of B flat. No, you should be able to play it in any key. Knowing your scales, constructing chords, so that if I said to you, play an A flat minor 7, like immediately your fingers should go there. Play D flat minor, there we go. Play C minor 7 flat 5, you should immediately go there, or A minor 7 flat 5. Okay, so you should be able to construct chords quickly, and that's something that we cover in that course. Your chord inversions, I've already shown you how important they are. We cover those as well. And just some basic harmonic movement. So you want to know things like, I've mentioned the 2-5-1, I've mentioned the turnaround, things like backdoor dominance, secondary dominance. Basically, the things that don't necessarily look exciting on your YouTube thumbnails, but they are the things that actually make everything else possible. Okay, so the first two levels of that pyramid are exactly what I teach in the Jazz Piano Fundamentals course, which is at the bottom of the pyramid, and the Jazz Piano Lab, where we're now becoming fluent at the whole language of jazz. One thing that I see all the time is students are trying to learn solo jazz piano, which is right at the top of the pyramid, right? And they're trying to learn it before they can even keep time. By keep time, I mean they can't even play it in time, like how Mark was there. So basically, they're trying to build the roof or to place the windows, and actually, they haven't even laid the foundation. There are no walls there. So you know what's going to happen, right? When you insert your very beautiful, fancy, expensive windows in the air, everything's just going to fall apart. So you can learn basically every Bill Evans voicing that exists. You can play McCoy Tyner voicings, so what voicings. But I mean, if you can't play these things in time, no one really cares, and you can memorize really complex chords or whatever. But I mean, if you can't use them in a tune, they're not really part of your vocabulary, So some people are trying to play maybe even things like walking bass lines, but unfortunately they haven't spent enough time playing along with the bass, So you've got to play along with the bass so that you can absorb how a bass player thinks. I'm talking to those people that want to go straight to solo piano at the top of the pyramid, right? So sometimes playing with a real bass player is going to help you to understand how a bass player thinks, how they actually walk. Even playing with a track will give you some sort of understanding of what a walking bass will feel like, But basically, the fundamentals are what make jazz transferable, learnable, and usable. So the fundamentals will teach you the harmonic formulas. They're going to help you to understand how tunes are built, so that when you look at Fly Me to the Moon, you're not saying, oh, Fly Me to the Moon is A minor 7 to D minor 7 to G. You're actually saying Fly Me to the Moon is chord 6, then a 2-5-1, then chord 4, and then you play the 2-5 of chord 6. Okay. If you're thinking like this, that means any key you should be able to do this. If I'm in the key of G flat, I can take exactly the same formula. Chord 6, fly me to the 2, and then 5 goes to 1, and then chord 4, and then we said the 2-5 of chord 6, right? And there's my chord 6, right? So once you understand all these ingredients, you start seeing the same patterns everywhere, particularly with jazz standards. And suddenly, when you're learning a new tune, it's not going to feel completely new. And when you're also playing in a new key, I mean, that's not going to be as intimidating anymore, because now you know your chord progressions, now you know your harmonic formula. And where are we learning these? In the Jazz Piano Fundamentals course. Okay, so we stop memorizing songs, as individual notes or individual chords. We start understanding music. And understanding harmony is really the beginning of understanding the jazz language. Okay, so once that foundation is solid, then even things like improvising, which is the next layer of the pyramid, improvising is going to make sense to you. Okay, so not just because you've memorized a whole bunch of flicks, but actually, and I mean, speaking of flicks, you can find quite a number of flicks actually in the ebook that's available for you. So don't forget to just type ebook in the comments, and I'll send you a link where you can download my ebook. But basically, you're not just collecting a bunch of flicks. When you've got that foundation, you'll understand what's underneath the music. Okay, so here's my question for you. Are there areas of your playing that you've convinced yourself that you already know? So a question for you is, can you play your scales? Well, how many keys can you play your scales in? Let's just say major scales, for instance. Could you actually play a 2-5-1 in any of those keys? Or can you play a turnaround in any of those keys that you've mentioned? Can you build chords without thinking about? When I say without thinking, I'm just talking about how quickly can you do it? Can you do it like that? So if I said to you, play an E7, do you just immediately go there, or do you have to work it out and say, oh no? Right? So I want you to be honest with yourself and answer these questions, okay? And feel free again to let me know in those comments the things that you feel you really, really need to work on, because sometimes the fastest way forward isn't really in learning something new. Sometimes it's in you simply being honest about what you still need to master Right, now if you're ready to build a solid foundation for jazz piano, again, please check out my jazz piano fundamentals. And I mean, if you know your fundamentals, but you're not quite fluent in them yet, then the Jazz Piano Lab is the thing to check out. I've actually got a bundle where you can get these two for a reduced fee. So again, if you check out the link in the description, you'll be able to access it. If you're not yet subscribed to this channel, please do me a favor and click that subscribe button. It's just going to help this channel to grow so that I can continue doing things like this. And again, jazz is something we do, so hopefully you can use these ideas and start mastering your fundamentals now. Even if you don't get the course, surely you can learn your scales, surely you can learn your chord progressions in all these keys. So work on these things, and I hope to see you in the next video.